Anger over Moosewala killing, weapon supply thrashed by inmates in Ludhiana. Sadhbir Singh had supplied weapons to shooters in the Moosewala case. Sadhbir Singh was attacked with bricks inside the jail and he sustained head injuries. The jail department has taken him to hospital for treatment. Sadhbir Singh was a horse trader and was arrested for supplying weapons to shooters. So one of the supplier of weapons in the Moosewala killing thrashed in a Ludhiana jail. Breaking news coming in now. And moving on to some sports news now. India outplayed England once again to register a thumping 49-run win in the second T20. To take a 2-0 lead in a 3-match series, Ravindra Jadeja was the standout performer for India with his 46 not-out run knock, which helped them post a challenging 170 for 8. Chasing a 171-run target, England were bundled out for 121 in 17 overs. Elena Rybakina becomes first player from Kazakhstan to win a Grand Slam title as she beat Tunisian third seed Ons Jabeur in Wimbledon. Rybakina fights back to win 3-6, 6-2, 6-2, becoming the youngest Wimbledon singles champion since 2011. Novak Djokovic all set to take on Nick Kyrgios of Australia in the men's singles final at Wimbledon today. Top-seeded Novak Djokovic reached the men's singles finals, defeating Great Britain's Cameron Norrie, whereas Kyrgios gained a place in the finals after Spanish legend Rafael Nadal walked out due to an injury. Italy is all set to debut against France in a Group D debut at the Women's Euro Cup. Italy will have to play without experienced midfielder Valentina Carnoia. France are amongst the favourites to win the tournament as they arrive at the competition on the back of 14 wins in a row. Third round of the Barbasol Championship completely disrupted due to heavy rains at Kentucky. Organisers try all day to resume play, but despite efforts of greenkeepers, are unsuccessful. And more news from Sri Lanka. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's whereabouts were not known after he moved out of his residence on Friday ahead of Saturday's protest, during which thousands of anti-government protesters stormed his official residence in Colombo. A report.
After the angered protesters flooded into Sri Lankan embattled president's residence on Saturday, the whereabouts of Gotabaya Rajapaksa are yet unknown.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa of Sri Lanka had to save his life by escaping, running away from the presidential palace as hundreds and thousands of protesters stormed inside the official residence of Sri Lankan president after a small resistance by the police, which caved in. Initially, the police present outside and inside the presidential palace, in fact, thought that they could resist. But going by the numbers of the protesters, they gave in, just providing enough time for Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his associates to leave from another door and make good an escape.
If reports are to be believed, he has moved out of his residence on Friday ahead of Saturday's protests. It has also surfaced that his luggage was rushed onto Sri Lankan Navy ship Gajabahu anchored at the Colombo port.
Pictures coming in on social media suggested that he went out of Colombo by sea route or possibly by an air route and has in fact fled Sri Lanka. Similar reports had emerged a couple of months back when the target was his brother and then Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. In fact, the ancestral home of the Rajapaksas was put to fire at that time. Similar pictures coming in now with the private residence of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who resigned later in the day, also being put to fire.
In the latest development, Gotabaya agreed to resign from his post after a meeting with Sri Lankan Parliament Speaker. Rajapaksa, who was facing calls for resignation since March, was using the president's house as his residence and office since protesters came to occupy the entrance to his office early April.
The people show the nation and the international community the power of the people. Now, the people have been asking for a few number of months to resign Gota. They asked Gota to resign and give the power to people. But what they did was they were trying to be in power using various methods. So today, the people who were in the struggle, they entered the President House possibly and took it into control. So now this is a real thing that happened today. What we have to say is to the people, now we have to gather and form a nation's government.
While Rajapaksa's whereabouts are still unknown, the protesters have now occupied both his office and official residence.
The protesters, the Sri Lankan citizens, are angry at the Rajapaksa clan, which at one point in time controlled almost 70% of Sri Lankan budget, and because of the bad policy decisions they took, some wrong actions they took, Sri Lanka finds itself in the financial mess that it is in. There is food crisis, there is fuel crisis. According to World Food Programme, many Sri Lankans, or majority of them perhaps, are not able to afford 1 square meal a day, and that's led to these protests for the last few months with impatient citizens wanting change of government, change of all leaders, and somehow hoping that a new set of leaders come in and bring in a measure of political stability and then economic prosperity back to the island nation.
Bureau Report for Republic TV.